Well, now, much to discuss on that, but let's talk first about the young woman from Birmingham who took on the government and won, or did she? Kate Riley had been told that if she didn't do 2 weeks of unpaid work at Poundland, she would lose her job seekers allowance. Her court hearing last Tuesday is being seen as a major setback for the government's Back to Work programme. But as BBC WM's political reporter Elizabeth Clinker explains, ministers are determined to persevere with their schemes.
It's the government's flagship policy to concentrate the minds of job seekers. But 2 weeks unpaid shelf stacking at Poundland in Kings Heath, Birmingham, meant Kate Riley had to leave her voluntary work at a local museum.
Those 2 weeks were a complete waste of my time, as the experience did not help me get a job. I wasn't given any training and I was left with no time to do my voluntary work or search for other jobs. The only beneficiary was Poundland, a multi-million-pound company.
The Court of Appeal ruled that government regulations underpinning the scheme had been inadequate.
Over the past 2 years, the government has unlawfully required tens of thousands of unemployed people to work without pay and unlawfully stripped thousands more of their subsistence benefits.
It's a major coup for the law firm based in Birmingham's Jewellery Quarter.
Public interest lawyers have worked on high-profile cases, from the ill-treatment of prisoners in Iraq to the closure of libraries in Gloucestershire. They've always denied that their work is politically motivated. They say it's up to governments and councils to comply with the law.
The government is tabling new regulations, which it says will avoid uncertainty. One of our region's MPs, a parliamentary aide at the Work and Pensions Department, is undeterred.
Young people find it very hard to get a job without experience, and they find it difficult to get experience without having a job. So these schemes really help people.
But if the government has to repay people who've worked for nothing, the bill for the taxpayer would be millions more than that famous £1.
Certainly would. Elizabeth Clinker reporting there. Now, of course, if you get into government, you won't be celebrating in the way that you are at the moment, the current government's embarrassment, because lawyers could be on your case as well. It's a real issue if the draftsmanship's not right with legislation, isn't it?
Well, look, I think the government does have a responsibility to help people get back into work, but they have to do so in a way that's legal, and in this case it clearly wasn't legal, that's fair and that's efficient. And in this case, as your report points out, this might end up actually costing a lot of money. The government have already paid to go to court on this. They're going to appeal, which is going to cost even more money. And then if they're unsuccessful, it's possible that tens of thousands of people are going to demand a rebate if, in their case as well, the forcing them to work was illegal.
Nadeem, it's beginning to look as though you've exploited this young person, and in the end at great expense to the public purse, potentially.
Well, it's interesting what Emma says, because her colleague Pat McFadden thinks actually what we're doing is the right thing, that people who are in receipt of benefits, young people, should be getting work experience. In fact, we passed legislation, or on the way to passing legislation last week, to correct what the judgment effectively said was the wording that was wrong with the previous legislation. But the important principle here is that should a young person get work experience to get them on their way to getting a real job.
She already was a volunteer
program
in a museum. She didn't need to stack shelves or whatever she was doing at Poundland.
Actually, if you look at the detail in this particular case, I think she asked for a retailing job in her application. There's nothing wrong with stacking shelves, Patrick. So Terry Leahy started life stacking shelves, became chief executive of Tesco's. I think it's a good thing. Extending it beyond 2 weeks is also a good thing, going up to 3 months of work experience. And actually, the Works programme is working incredibly well. It costs £300 per young person to get them through the Works programme. Under Labour, their scheme was costing £5,000 to £6,000, 20 times more when there's no money around.
And that's the point, isn't it, Emma? And it does concentrate the minds of job seekers.
Look, I didn't say I didn't agree with work experience. I agree with work experience.
Good.
But that work experience should involve training. And if somebody is doing a full-time job, it should involve them getting paid the minimum wage, frankly. And in this particular circumstance, as you said, Kate Riley was doing voluntary work at a museum. Then she was forced to give up that voluntary work, and she was made to work full-time for Poundland, and Poundland, or the state, didn't even pay her the minimum wage. I think that's unfair.
We heard from Harriet Baldwin that it does seem to be working, that we're hearing again and again that the number of people finding work in the private sector, you actually have to go back many decades to get the sort of numbers we're seeing now.
I agree with people getting experience, but I also think that it has to be done on a case-by-case basis, and in the case of Kate Riley, she was a geography graduate. She should have got some training. She's taken up a job now stacking shelves, so she's not against stacking shelves. She's working at a supermarket as we speak. So that was not the principle of this case. The principle was she wasn't getting paid.
Quick final word on this, if you would.
The principle, if you're a receipt of benefits, there's nothing wrong with you getting work experience.
OK, well, we must leave it there for the moment. Thank you.